In a lot of worship services, there are these gestures we do, and they can almost feel like second nature. But what if one of the most common ones? What if it holds a much deeper meaning than we ever realized? Well, today, we're diving into a devotional text that really unpacks the hidden spiritual significance behind a very, very simple physical act. And that brings us right to the heart of it, doesn't it? When someone lifts their hands in worship, is that just a gesture, a tradition we've picked up? Or could it be a profound spiritual act with real consequences in our lives? The source material we're looking at today makes a really strong case for the second one. So, right away, the text grounds this whole idea in ancient scripture. It frames lifting your hands as something as serious and significant as an evening sacrifice. But the author points out a problem. While this gesture is ancient, so many of us today just do it mechanically. Or maybe we don't do it at all, just because we've lost touch with its spiritual weight. Okay, and this is where the story gets really interesting. It all started with a puzzling observation the author made years ago, something that started connecting the dots for him between our physical bodies and our spiritual lives. So, get this. During his ministry, especially in services that were focused on healing, the author started noticing a strange pattern. A surprising number of people had the exact same problem. They physically couldn't lift their hands because of pain or stiffness. And this wasn't just a coincidence. It was happening over and over again. And here is the connection, the real light bulb moment for the author. He realized that the very same people who are now physically unable to lift their hands were often the ones who, back when they were perfectly healthy, had chosen not to lift their hands during worship. So, trying to make sense of all this, the author asked God for some insight. And the explanation that's presented in the text is that this was a direct consequence. The instruction to worship with hands lifted had been given, but because it was ignored, a physical limitation eventually set in.
So let's dig a little deeper here, because this builds into the core theological point of the whole text. It's not just about a simple cause and effect. It's about the very nature of what this act of worship means.
According to this perspective, lifting your hands is, well, it's not just some optional symbolic thing. It's defined as a direct act of faith and obedience. It's a physical posture that's meant to reflect a spiritual state, one of total surrender and responsiveness to God. The text even describes how this works. The author suggests that when believers choose not to follow the word, in this specific case, by not lifting their hands, it actually creates an opening. It allows Satan to capitalize on that disobedience, which can then show up as a physical problem. But, this is really important, the text doesn't just diagnose a problem and leave it there. It offers a solution, one that's rooted right in Scripture, that frames action and practice as the real pathway to getting that strength back. And this really illustrates the main principle. The source points to a passage from Hebrews which literally tells believers to lift up the hands which hang down. The interpretation here is just as literal. Even if it hurts, the physical act of trying is the act of faith. The whole idea is that you act on the word first, and then the healing follows. And here's the amazing promise behind it all. Consistency is what transforms the struggle. By continuing to practice this act of worship, you're essentially training your body with your spirit. And over time, the goal is that what was once painful and difficult becomes effortless, strong, and completely healed.
So after walking through this author's really unique observation and argument, what's the big takeaway? Why does this perspective on such a simple gesture even matter?
Let's bring it all together. The source material really gives us three key insights. First, that lifting hands is a truly significant spiritual act, not just some empty tradition. Second, it suggests there's a direct link between this specific act of obedience and worship and our physical well-being. And finally, it's a call to actively practice our faith, believing that doing so can help us overcome our physical limitations.
And all of this leaves us with a really fascinating question to think about. Regardless of your own personal practice, what does this perspective reveal about that powerful, and let's be honest, often mysterious connection between our physical bodies and our deepest beliefs? It really suggests our actions and our faith might be way more intertwined than we ever imagined.